This is Popular Front, a podcast focused on the niche details of modern warfare and underreported conflict with me, Jake Hanrahan. Today we're speaking to writer and researcher Matt Koonce about the ongoing flare-up of very serious clashes in Palestine and Israel. There were headlines across the world recently when Palestinian journalist Shireen Abu Akleh was killed recently in Jenin when Israeli forces were leading a raid on the camp there. There have been clashes before this, things have been ongoing for a while, and we're going to talk about everything that led up to that murder and then beyond that as well. If you like what we're doing, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/popularfront. Very serious renewed tensions, clashes in Palestine, Israel. As we know, very sadly, Shireen, Al Jazeera journalist, was shot in the head. Absolutely horrific. Her funeral was then attacked by Israeli forces. The fucking coffin was nearly knocked over. Just horrific scenes there. But it didn't start there, right? It's the product of clashes that already started, right? Around Jenin, around Ramadan, I think this started. Maybe tell us, let's go back to the start of these kind of the recent tensions and how that flared up.
Okay, sure. So Ramadan is, always a particularly flammable time in Palestine for obvious reasons. A large Muslim majority there, so we're used to seeing an increased amount in attacks, as well as people going to pray at Al-Aqsa. There's often a lot of times conflict there, like we've seen this year. So it's really hard to put a pinpoint on exactly where this started, but there has been a large string of attacks in Israel's 1947 borders. So the part of the country that is not being illegally occupied under international law. Just reading international law there. So my point being there is that it's not common to see so many attacks inside of Israel's 1947 borders. So that has really shaken the military establishment as well as sort of the civilian, just civil society. So that has led increased pressure on the Israeli army to go out and operate in the West Bank, where we're seeing more clashes now. So it's kind of a give and take. So yeah, like I said, it's hard to put an exact start date on this, but it's just been going on definitely for the last 2 months.
Right, and I think when we saw clashes from inside Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Israelis say that Palestinians were throwing stones from there. The Palestinians say that they kind of charged him for no reason. That was about the kind of the start of it, right? I mean, if we had to pick.
Yeah, I would definitely say that's the case. So even without the attacks inside of Israel, I think there was always going to be, clashes at Al-Aqsa, just by virtue of that being, for anyone who's not too familiar with Palestine, I'll put it this way, that Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa as a whole is basically the heartbeat of Palestinians and, or rather, Palestinian national identity. So in Jerusalem, that is kind of a line in the sand, should we say. So it's kind of understood that, Palestine, that is the capital of a Palestinian state. That's what PA President Mahmoud Abbas always says. So it's kind of seen as encroaching on their right to worship, which I understand. But yeah, there's, it's kind of he said, she said, as far as, who threw the rock first or who shot a rubber bullet first. I don't think that was clear in the videos that I had seen, but from what I did see was Israeli police rushing through the gates with tear gas and rubber bullets and batons, and there was women and children inside of the mosque. So with an enclosed space, it really led a lot of havoc with the tear gas and whatnot.
Yeah, and so there was some very serious clashes in response to that. rubber bullets, and I believe one protester died actually recently, having been injured at those clashes. Maybe take us through that. Like, who is this? Is this a specific militant group that's clashing, or is it just the youth of Al Aqsa? Like, what happened there?
In general, this is just Jerusalem youth. There's no specific organization that's fronting it. It's kind of similar to like the intifadas that we've seen in the past, where it's more of a public uprising than any sort of armed militant I guess campaign or whatever. So we can talk about the man who just died, Walid al-Sharif. So on April 22nd, like you had mentioned, he was injured at Al-Aqsa. And this is just one example of hundreds of people who have been injured. But for example, he was shot in the head from a rubber bullet. This was seen on video as well as confirmed by witness testimonies. That being said, this is a 21-year-old man. Israel said that he was never hit by a rubber bullet, but instead he hit his head as he fell from throwing rocks. So that's just kind of a good example of the sort of, I guess, cognitive sort of differences we're dealing with here. But anyways, the Israeli hospital declined to give an exact cause of death. So again, it's kind of hard to go any more in that there. And we can save what happened on this Sunday for a little bit later, but that is a good example.
So how does this all tie into the clashes in Jenin?
Jenin is a very interesting place, historically speaking. So Jenin is a town of, I believe, 50,000, and inside of it, there's the Jenin refugee camp, and that holds 10,000 people. I'm sorry, I pulled up the numbers here. It's 40,000 in the town, 10,000 in the refugee camp. So this is where Shireen Abu Akleh was murdered, and it's really another center, focal point of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. So the refugee camp was started in 1953 for Palestinians who were pushed out of Haifa and the northern part of Israel, what we know as Israel 47 borders today. So they had been pushed out of Haifa and from around Mount Carmel into Jenin, and then Jenin refugee camp, which has been standing for almost 70 years now. So anyways, my point being is that it's known as the homeland of martyrs, or the birthplace of martyrs, rather. So, for example, there was, I believe, 28 suicide bombers who had originated from the Jenin refugee camp, not even Jenin city, but specifically this 10,000 person population during the second Intifada. And this led to Operation Defensive Wall and the Battle of Jenin, which is a lot of history I could get into. But anyways, so essentially in 2003, or 2002 rather, Israel launched Operation Defensive Wall in response to 28 suicide bombers who had originated in Jenin. And they essentially went to the camp and razed it. It was the Battle of Jenin. Dozens of Israeli troops died. Hundreds of Palestinian civilians died. For example, a lot of the current Fatah leadership, Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade leadership we see these days, their families were killed in that attack. So you see a lot of repercussions from 20 years ago coming back today. Now, my point in bringing up all this history is that this was actually the start almost of Shireen Abu Akleh, who joined Al Jazeera as a correspondent in, I believe it was the late 90s when Al Jazeera started, but she didn't become a household name in Palestine until the siege of Jenin, the Battle of Jenin rather. So it's a bit ironic that the city is where she got her start and where she met her end.
It's extremely sad. But there were clashes in the camp before this incident where she was killed. Why were those happening?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting. In Jenin, there are different, political and militant organizations, as with, all across Palestine. And I'm drawing a blank on the specific unit, but they are essentially known as the Jenin brigade. So all of these different militants from across different political and different backgrounds come together, and they form what is essentially a militia. It patrols Jenin, sets up roadblocks, just does kind of the normal stuff that an insurgency group would do to kind of, I guess, flex its power or whatever. So this is different, I guess. I'm trying to find a good way to put it. This is different. This is not the case all throughout the West Bank. I mean, the West Bank in particular is known for kind of its civil strife, not just with the Israelis, but interpersonally with Palestinians. So we're starting to see almost a how do I put this? The militant groups in Jenin are steps ahead of other militants in the West Bank, and we're seeing it through cooperation amongst different militants, as well as the sort of bottom-up approach of just changing the leadership, or rather, top down in the sense that changing the leadership, and bottom up in really changing, who militants are operating with and whatnot, and increasing cooperativeness and whatnot. So it's dangerous for the IDF to operate there. And we've seen that. And we've seen after Shireen was murdered 2 days later, they had raided a house looking for Palestinian Islamic Jihad members, and one IDF colonel, Major Colonel, I believe, Sergeant Major Noam Raz, I might have gotten that pronunciation wrong, a 23-year veteran of the Imam counter-terror unit, was killed there, actually. So, it's definitely dangerous.
Right, and these the militants, the Palestinian militants in Jenin, they have some cooperation with Hamas factions, right? I've seen there's that kind of strange video of what they're saying is Al-Qassam patrolling through Jenin. Now, they're not necessarily the same militants as the ones that control it as such, but they have some cooperation from what I understand.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, because this is definitely an overlooked aspect of the conflict. So something in particular that I think people have maybe not picked up on is how quiet Hamas has been, in a sense, this past 2 months. I mean, you look at last year, and they were the main, it was the Hamas versus the Israeli army eventually with the rockets. So they were kind of the focal point of Palestinian national attention, what have you. So it's definitely a change this year, how we're not seeing such huge participation by Hamas. But on the other hand, I have been noticing an increase in comfortability with Hamas members operating in the West Bank. So 5 years ago, the Palestinian Authority had a much stronger hold on the area, I would say. So this sort of Islamic extremism to them is dangerous. We see what happened in 2005 between Fatah and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. They essentially expelled Fatah. So I think that it has to do with both Hamas gaining strength and with Fatah losing its hold over the West Bank. But you're right. I have seen Hamas flags flying in Jenin. I have seen Al-Qassam brigades patrolling. I don't think that they have a very big presence militantly yet. I think that most of what you see of them is kind of done just to let people know that their presence is there. But yeah, Hamas has for a long time been trying to bridge that gap between Gaza and the West Bank, and I think that they're succeeding to a certain extent.
Yeah, and that creates problems in itself, right? I mean, even I remember when I was in Palestine last, like it was a long time ago, it was like 2018, covering the clashes. Again, there were clashes around Al-Aqsa. And Palestinians, some that we spoke to, were like, yeah, no, we don't want Hamas here in the West Bank, but, well, we weren't in the West Bank, but they're in any of their areas in East Jerusalem as well. And they were just like, yeah, we don't want them here, but they're here, sort of thing. And that was, quite a few years ago. From what I understand, it's creating internal issues as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of those things where it's really tough to kind of understand people's motivations for supporting Hamas and whatnot, because a lot of people, even in Gaza before 2005, weren't necessarily jihadists. They weren't, Muslim extremists. But that being said, the Palestinian administration has all but, just kind of laid down and let Israel kind of, do what it wants to in the West Bank. And that, of course, is going to have repercussions, and people are not going to see the PA as being able to protect them. So I think that Gaza is a good example of this. Once people realize that, these militants can't protect you, it's kind of like you want to get on the winning side almost, because I definitely think that we're starting to see the paradigm shift from, more secular nationalist resistance, if you want to say, and leading to more, extreme forms of Islamic terrorism or just political jihad or what have you.
And that has led to some pretty brutal attacks, right? So within the clashes, obviously the IDF going in and punching up women and shooting up the place. There has also been some very brutal attacks from the Palestinian side in the last 2 months. Maybe let's talk about them.
Yeah, absolutely. So there has been 18 people, Israeli civilians, killed in the past since the end of March. 13 of which were civilians. So, and another interesting fact: 4 of those attackers did come from the Jenin camp. So I believe that there was 6 attackers total. I could be wrong on that exact number, but it was the majority, is essentially what I'm saying. So that in itself has brought a lot of attention onto the camp. Like I said, Jenin is on the other side of the green border, so it is not in the 47 borders of Israel. But like I said, we've been seeing these infiltration operations into those borders. So this isn't anything new, but it's becoming more understood, I think, that one attack inside of the 47 borders as opposed to the 67 borders is much more politically, propaganda-wise, just a more impactful attack. And so I think that I think that that's kind of driving that.
Right. And obviously this has led to the raids that we saw, where tragically, journalist Shireen Abu Akleh was killed. Let's talk about that. What happened there?
Sure. So on May 11th, Shireen Abu Akleh was going to the Jenin camp to cover an Israeli raid on a home. And when she got there, it's very unclear, certain aspects, but from what it seems, she got there and essentially she had just begun to cover these things when suddenly there was a hail of gunfire. Her coworker Ali Al-Samudi was hit in the back right before she was, and the last words out of her mouth was, "Ali's been hit." And then in the video, you can see another woman next to her. Very tragic video. She's essentially Shireen's dead, face down, and there was just even more graphic videos. It's just a terrible scene, but instantly, internet was ablaze, not only with upset at the injustice that had just happened, but of course Israelis saying Palestinian terrorists killed her, Palestinians saying, well, the reporters on the ground that were being shot at say that the Israelis had fired at them. So it became this big Hezbollah propaganda sort of beast for Israel to try and wrangle, I think. But essentially, the truth was there, the information was there, and we've seen multiple investigations. We've seen one done by Bellingcat that was actually very enlightening, that essentially went over all of the open source intelligence that was available using metadata from videos and whatnot. And they did determine that, while they can't conclude anything 100%, everything backs up the witnesses' testimony that Israelis in that direction had fired on them. So,
I mean, having covered clashes there on the ground myself, not as intense as ongoing raids or live rounds, but having covered them, it's no secret that Israeli forces are not particularly that bothered about firing on journalists, attacking journalists. And in fact, I think the day that Shireen was murdered, there was a statement from someone in the Israeli forces saying that, well, journalists are armed anyway. They're just armed with a camera, essentially trying to separate reporters from being civilians, which is fucking outrageous,
I know that quote really took a lot of people aback, as it should. I mean, it was a pretty ridiculous thing to say. He said, they're essentially armed with cameras. So that really does kind of give a good sort of insight into the way that the Israeli military apparatus functions surrounding journalists and whatnot. But going back on that, so essentially right after Shireen was murdered, the Israeli police took it upon themselves to go to Shireen's brother's house, and there was already a crowd gathered there, and they essentially let them know, do not fly Palestinian flags, do not chant nationalist anthems, or else, this is going to be illegal. So they said that. The brother told the police and told the press, this is what he said. He said, I cannot control the masses. They're going to participate in the funeral because it's patriotism in which all Palestinians of all political and religious sects will participate. Yep. So, I mean, it's like, I don't really know what they wanted him to do. But even if he wanted to, he couldn't, but he didn't want to because it's completely ridiculous to request. But anyways, protests spring up all across Jerusalem. Relatively peaceful that day. We saw in Beit Hanina, again, I don't speak Arabic, so excuse my pronunciations, anyone listening. But a few people were arrested there. There was some rocks thrown, Molotovs thrown. That was that. The next day, the Palestinian Authority came out and said, we're not going to let Israel run a joint investigation into this with us for obvious reasons. They're the ones who committed the crime. They have a vested interest here. So that caused quite a storm in Israel. However, they did appeal to the International Criminal Court, as well as the United States and other, Western powers that would traditionally back Israel, and said, please, we need help with this. We need help determining what exactly happened. And nothing from those investigations have come out yet, but I don't think that any more information can be revealed than what was had come out already. But anyways, that was May 12th, and then there was a few other smaller incidents. For example, Walid Al-Omari, the director of the Al Jazeera office in Palestine, he was carrying the body of Shireen, and it was stopped and had everything searched. But that was all just kind of premonitions of things to come. So on May 13th was the day that Israel attacked the funeral. So I'm sure everyone listening to this has seen the video. It was everywhere. So but for anyone unaware, at I want to get the hospital right. St. Joseph French Hospital. That's right. So at St. Joseph French Hospital in Jerusalem, the funeral was taking place. There was Palestinian flags being flown and people chanting about their country, as most funerals like this would be. And essentially, the Israeli police just said, we're not having it, and they rushed in and just caused havoc. I mean, there's really not much I can say about it. I think it's pretty apparent when you watch the videos. Like, it just happened. They rushed them. They started beating the pallbearers. The coffin almost dropped. Absolutely horrific stuff. But anyways, what didn't come out until Sunday was, after that, they actually rushed into the hospital, and they injured pregnant women. They hurt a bunch of people just by running through there like bulls in China shop. And the CCTV footage actually got released. So anyone listening to this, I would encourage that they go listen to that. But the hospital just announced on Monday that they're going to be suing. So they're suing the Israeli police for damages. They're saying that, anyone who was injured in that, please come to them. They're going to, handle the legal case. So I don't know the international status of that hospital. I don't know if it's a French hospital or if that's just a name, but it does raise some, legal concern for the Israeli police as well. But yeah, I mean, that's not stopped them in the past. So
right, and am I right in saying they raided Shireen's house as well? I think the day she was killed, actually.
Yeah. So that was. I'm actually not entirely sure what the distinction is. People were saying that was her brother's house. People were saying that was her house. It certainly might have been her house that her brother was at. I might have just gotten that detail incorrect, but. Yeah, essentially they did go to where her body, or I don't believe they had her body at that time, but yeah, they went there. You must be right. Actually, it must have been her house with her brother being there, because the entire family was there. So yeah, they just did not have much respect for the body at all.
Like, why would they raid her house? Like, did they give a reason?
So I think the raid was more I think we're talking about the same incident here. I think that they were there more to tell the brother, essentially, like, don't have people flying flags, don't chant national anthems. From what I saw, they got essentially kicked out of the house by the members. I didn't see them getting the full opportunity to rifle through, all of her things and whatnot. I'm sure that they were looking there in sort of a last-ditch effort to, sort of see if there was anything that could help their case. But from my understanding, the main purpose of that video was essentially just to tell them not to fly Palestinian flags.
I mean, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but you would think it wouldn't take raiding somebody's house while their whole family are mourning there after she's been killed, just to tell them, hey, stop flying flags of the country that you're from. You know what I mean? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir there about that, but I do think that it certainly comes down to a level of control. And Jerusalem is a bit different from the West Bank and Gaza in that that's kind of, Israel's really set its sights on Jerusalem being, its capital one day. So I think that right now this is more of a power struggle between Palestinians and Israelis, in a larger sense of just, who controls this land, who's making the rules. And I think that this weekend, or rather 5 days ago, was a good microcosm of that.
So there were the clashes at the funeral for Shireen, and there have been clashes again at the funeral for the young man we mentioned earlier, the lad that was killed, or as the Israelis say, died hitting his head during clashes at Al-Aqsa. I know a guy that was there. He reckons that the Palestinians started throwing rocks first, of course, as they say, and then the Israelis, that's what the Israelis say, and then the Palestinians say that the Israelis just attacked the funeral. Haven't seen them just attack Shireen's funeral. I find that, both things can be very possible. But let's go over that. Like, what happened there? I know that created quite serious clashes. The footage was quite wild.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with what you just said. I think that, it's definitely a he said, she said thing. And I don't even, necessarily, I wouldn't be surprised or, blame them in any sense if they were throwing rocks. I mean, it makes sense in the context that this was, a man who had just been killed on, the holiest place in the whole region. So, I mean, I don't think I'm wording myself right, but
you could understand why young men very angry. Their mate is dead. Yeah,
it's almost like, and these are. It's a funeral of largely Jerusalem youth, and Shireen Abu Akleh's funeral also had thousands of youth, but it was also organized and run by people in their 30s and 40s, people who had been, dealing with the occupation for much longer. I think that, for lack of a better term, these younger guys might have a little bit more revolutionary zeal in them. I think that anyone who wasn't really expecting things to pop off after, I guess, taking everything into consideration. I mean, hindsight's 2020, but like I'm saying, it's just not very surprising to me that there were rocks being thrown.
And that spread out, right? There was quite big clashes for like into the night.
Oh yeah, all throughout the night. And I had to say, I'm not too old, but I've never seen such thorough routing of the Israeli police. Like it was really something else. Like you would see entire Israeli police detachments essentially running away, evacuating out of these East Jerusalem neighborhoods, Arab majority neighborhoods. And I think something like 6 police were injured, over 100 Palestinians were injured. So it's not like it's not like they didn't get their licks too. But I've never seen such overwhelming force from just like the population there. Like you can definitely tell it's more of a popular resistance than anyone pointing the finger and saying, "Hey, young kids, go throw rocks or Molotovs." Like this is just, I think, Jerusalem youth who are sick and tired of their friends dying, and that's really, at the end of the day, that's it.
Yeah, I watched the footage and I agree. It was very interesting to see. It was like there's clearly a lot more thought had gone into this as opposed to just throw the rocks. You know what I mean? Like there was kind of plans there. Plans were afoot. You could tell. I saw it. It was a similar thing I saw when filming with the youth wing of the PKK years back when they were fighting in Okmaidan against the Turkish forces. Like they had everything mapped out. They wouldn't just run to a corner and throw. They were like, no, we'll go to this corner because if we throw a Molotov this way, they'll go that way, and then we can route them there. We'll go to that corner, throw rocks at them. You know what I mean? It was like it was planned. It looks chaos, but it was planned. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, and that's essentially the whole issue with like counterinsurgency for the Israelis. I mean, they're dealing with kids with Molotovs and rocks. It's a little bit different, but like, yeah, these kids. I mean, I saw videos from that night of Molotovs, like 4 Molotovs coming over 2 backyard fences and hitting an Israeli patrol, and then of course they spin and try and shoot them with the rubber bullets, but they know the terrain so well that they're already halfway down the block by then. It's like, it's really kind of impressive in a sense. And you can tell that they get a lot of practice, basically.
Yeah. And in terms of the more militant side of things, it's not just kids with Molotovs and rocks. There are shootings, there are stabbings, there are killings. What's going on there now? I imagine that there's a lot more militant factions getting a lot of new members at the moment. I know when I was there was I know people say, oh, there was no specific group in Al-Aqsa, but there was, because one of them gave me a hat. Like one of the youth gave me a hat. And it was that Al-Aqsa Brigade's hat. You know what I mean? The Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigade's hat. So yeah. What's the situation now? Like, is there a lot more militant organizing? Have you heard anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a good point to make. And I didn't mean, as far as Jerusalem goes, there's definitely a less militant, element to it, in the sense that, with guns and rockets and whatnot.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That's not to say that there isn't that. But I want to go back just a few days, because this is going to answer your question. Essentially, the morning that Shireen's funeral was attacked, there was a raid in Jenin, and this is the raid where the sergeant major was killed. This was a 4-hour-long raid. Some really incredible footage came out of it. Them firing, shoulder-mounted rockets into the houses and whatnot, trying to dislodge these 2 PIJ members.
For people that don't know, PIJ being Palestinian Islamic Jihad, a militant group there.
Yes, thank you. So Daoud al-Zubaydi, again, excuse my pronunciation there. He was a high-ranking member of Fatah in the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade. Somehow he got hit in the stomach during this firefight and ended up going to the hospital. Now, I've looked into it. I'm still very unclear what a senior Fatah member was doing there. I'm guessing he was trying to mediate in a sense, because I certainly don't think he was holding a gun or fighting in the traditional sense, because it just wouldn't make sense logically. There's hundreds of young men there who are more than willing to do it. My point being is that he was sent to a hospital in Israel because things got so serious, and then he died on Sunday. Now, we've seen Fatah. There was a lot of marches on Monday saying essentially that if you don't give us, originally it was saying if anything bad happens to him in the hospitals, there's gonna be serious things, serious hell to pay. He ended up dying. I think that they were more referring to like if Israel assassinated him or something.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, his family had died during Operation Defensive Shield. I think I said defensive wall earlier. I meant to say defensive shield. That was in 2002 when they raided Jenin. So just another example of how that affects things today. But anyways, my point being is that Fatah still clearly has some pull in Jenin if he is out there close enough to be getting hit. It's hard to say. Going back to what you were talking about in Jerusalem, with one specific militant group, I would say that the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade is by far the most prolific. I'm not surprised at all that they were open enough to be giving out hats to you and whatnot. But I do think that there's a lot more. I think that a lot of the youth that we saw at Al-Aqsa, I'm sure participate in their struggle in more ways than just that. Like, I'm sure that there were other militants from other groups, but it was originally a prayerful day, so I don't think that they were planning on getting on those big clashes, but I could be wrong.
Who are the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades attached to? Because they're not big enough to be their own independent entity without being like, a cell of another group. Is there any evidence that they're, linked to someone else?
Yeah, they're the armed wing of Fatah. So
they are. Oh, shows what I know.
No. I do believe that they. I don't want to contradict myself, but that is my understanding. And so, for as long as I'm familiar with, it has been the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade being Fatah's militant wing.
All right, mate. Well, this is all looking like, I don't know. It's not just the same as. Every so often it flares up, but this looks really quite serious. Where do you think this might be headed? Regarding the clashes, regarding the conflict. Has Israel said anything that makes you think it might go one way or the other, or what do you think?
I actually do. I think that Israel has. I think that they're tired of kind of being on the losing foot for what seems to be the last few years. They're still, statistically killing more Palestinians than Israelis are being killed. It's not like that's not what I mean. What I mean is that it's these sort of propaganda wins, and I think that essentially they're getting sick and tired of like the sort of just acceptance of there being militant presences in these camps. So if you look at Operation Defensive Shield, this is a very similar situation where they had 28 suicide bombers come from there. So they essentially went in there and just raised it. I mean, like it was brutal, and hundreds of people died. But for the next few years, I mean, the attacks did stop to a certain extent. So I think that they will probably try some large scale offensive towards either Jenin or I would actually say Jenin. I can't think of another more suitable target. So I think more than anything, they're just going to try and dislodge the militant factions there. But you know how counterinsurgency works. So it's not going to go smoothly.
Right. Yeah. Okay, mate. Is there anything else you want to say about this?
I think that's it. Yeah, that's all I got.
All right, man. I'm sure we've made a lot of people very upset and angry with the terms or whatever we've said, but that's all good. But where can people follow you and look at more of your work regarding all this this situation in Palestine?
You can check me out on Twitter at Koonce_Matt, KOONCE_MATT. That's where you'll find most of my work.
All right, mate. Thank you so much. That was really good.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate it.
That was independent writer and researcher Matt Koonce talking to us about the elevated clashes between Israel and Palestine, particularly in the Jenin camp, where things are looking very serious. Definitely check out Matt on Twitter. He's one of the best sources for Palestine-Israeli conflict, in my opinion. If you like what we're doing here at Popular Front, please do consider supporting us at patreon.com/popularfront. For as little as $5 a month, you get extra episodes, bonus episodes, which is essentially a whole other podcast in itself. It's only available to people on the Patreon. There is extra video content that you won't find anywhere else. All sorts on there. Patreon.com/popularfront. Again, we do not accept any corporate investment. We do not let any shareholders try and come in and fuck with what we're doing. So the way we make money is patreon.com/popularfront, and also selling cool t-shirts at popularfront.shop. There are t-shirts. Oh yeah, the support patches are back in stock after about 3 years, so if you want to get them, they'll be going out soon. They've sold loads. I don't think we've got many left, but yeah, check it out, popularfront.shop. Thank you to our podcast sponsors. They are Oracle Coffee Shop in Portland, Oregon, USA. They're an independent coffee business selling only fair trade products. See them at 3875 South West Bond Avenue, 97239. Tell them Popular Front sent you. Thank you to Grindcore House, a pair of independent coffee shops in Philadelphia, USA. One in South, one in West. Find them on socials at Grindcore House. And thank you to Propagandopolis, an outlet selling and writing about historical conflict propaganda from around the world. Buy prints at propagandopolis.com. Use a promo code POPULARFRONT10 for 10% off. If you run an independent business and you're interested in sponsoring Popular Front podcast episodes, hit me up at jake@h11.tv. If you want to follow us on social media, Instagram at popular.front, Twitter at popularfront_, and if you want to follow me anywhere, it's at Jake_Hanrahan, HANRAHAN. That's how you spell my surname. Be sure to check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/popularfront. Very soon, in the next 2 weeks, probably less, there will be a brand new documentary out there, a full thing. I'm very excited for it. It's going to be called Frontline Hooligan. If you follow us on the socials, you've probably seen the trailer for it. I think it's one of the best trailers I've made, actually. It blew my hair back when I come out with it. I was like, yeah, fuck, that's nice. I like the trailer. Basically, we spent time filming in Ukraine with Ukraine's first anti-fascist football hooligan firm that has turned into a militia, essentially, and has gone to fight the Russians on the front line. We spent some time with them on the outskirts of Kiev at their base, at their outposts, just before they head out to the east. I think it was very different to any other coverage you'll see. I'm really happy with it. So yeah, it's going to be out soon. I'm still editing it, but it will be out there. So youtube.com/popularfront. Definitely check that out. And if you want to see anything else we got going on, just go to the website. Everything is there. It's essentially a landing page, www.popularfront.co, and you'll find everything there. Music in this episode, the intro was by Home, and as always, the outro was by our mate Sam Black. Check his music out at samblackpf.com. Thank you very much to the high tier Patreons. They are Claire Hofbauer, Benjamin Topper, Chongus Bongwater, Cameron Collins, Nutty, Alex Harvey, Q Loves Cake Farts, Human Hatred, Nicholas Blomberg, Matthew Diffley, Noah Schmidt, Lisa, Jane Millerchip, Claire, Liana, Sean, Christianovich, NTHG, Ethan Zwick, Champagne Anarchist, Josh M, Elisa Middlefart, David McManus, Joaquin Williamson Holt, Udoye Travis, Ikta K, Tom Petrie, James Leons, Lisa Milgram, Bradley Davies, No Dogs No Hamsters, Brendan Crave, B, Drift, Pete Hesher, RX, Travis Lieberman, Cherry, Ben Marshall, Dallas Dunn, Shikhar Gupta, LD50 Seattle, K Glitter Vulcan, Meredith Waters, Bethany Swoland, Adam H, Ryan Barbadillo, Derivative Fool, Larson 8669, Karante, Bjorn Kirsten, Diamond Steen, Michael O'Connor, TFD, Nicholas Butter, JD, Jav, Ian Froese, James Cully, Anil Dingus, Tynan Daly, Ethan, Shanklin the Painter, Fitzmadrid, Ed Coulthard, Mike Barone, Ben, Scott Hopton, Liam Williams, Chris Cusimano, Degenerate Zero Alpha, Giorgio Arani, D.A., Trey Nance, Amy R, Rubicon, Frank Austin, Amelia Me, Noah Ease, Nate Van Dor, Christina Rivetti, Freya Northman, Noah, Andrew Hurley, Vida Provost, Brian McLaughlin, Tom Lochrin, Young Wasabi, Tony Bin, Adam Bergsnyder, JL, Stephen Davila, Dan Dunham, Fletcher Tate, Chad Walker, Diana Gorvanek, Lawrence Abrahams, What Bitcoin Did with Peter McCormack, Christopher Martin, Ryan Sandercock, and Maurice Zumbul. Thank you all so much. Much appreciated. Without you lot, this would not keep floating along and thriving, not just floating as it is. Thank you all so much.